So I preached this message in my sleep, in my dreams last night, 3 different times, and not one of them went very well. In fact, in one of them, I preached, it was the first service in my dream, and I preached all the way until 10:50. And all of the first service got up and walked out. And all of you came in while I was preaching, and everybody was just angry at me. Like, everybody was very angry. So anyway, you guys can deal with your own hearts on that one. I'm not sure why you were so angry. But hey, before we jump into it, it is the week before Thanksgiving, and I really just want to say thank you for being the greatest church in the whole world. I came with fear and trepidation to Connecticut, many of you know that, and fear and trepidation to a small church and into the senior pastorate. Never have one day felt like I was the right guy for the job, but I just have to tell you, I am having the time of my life. Dana and I love you. We hope and pray you have a great Thanksgiving, and we are just incredibly thankful for this moment of life that God's given us together to impact New England and Connecticut. And so thank you for loving us and for serving Jesus with us, and we hope you have a great Thanksgiving and that you eat a lot of pie, but not that one in the lobby. Okay. So look at the title today, Awakening to Grace Living. Paul's going to give us a wake-up call today. And I want you to see the subtitle, How the Gospel Transcends Politics and Gives Us a Greater Call. I have very much been looking forward to getting into Romans 13 because, like first century believers, we are living in very politically tumultuous, complicated, chaotic, confusing times. And Christians have a real hard time, followers of Jesus, a real hard time finding that the roadmap emotionally and psychologically and spiritually of navigating the complexity of our time. Say, are you going to get real political? Not deeply political, but if you will let Romans 13, if you'll let the voice of God and the Spirit of God teach you from Romans 13, the net impact is you will be set free, your anxiety level will plummet, your tension, your rage, your clickbait life, incredible peace will invade your heart and soul, and you'll be set free from the rage narrative. If you'll really get what happens in this chapter and why. And what I want you to understand about what Paul is doing in later part of the book of Romans is he's sort of like a coach. Now, I don't know about you. How many of you played sports either in elementary school, high school, post-high school? Anytime in your life you played sports? Wave at me. Okay, many of you. We had, on Friday of this week, our first two-hand touch football game in my backyard with my grandkids. It was Chad and Brady. Chad's 10, Brady's 5, against Charlie, she's 10, and Augie I think is 7. So, and I was full-time quarterback. Say why? Because either way I win, that way. So we played two-hand touch football, and I kept, first time that several of them had played this game, so teaching them how to huddle up and teaching them how I'm calling a play and what to do during the play. And it was a pretty good game, except for Brady kept walking off the field. He would just get tired of playing football, and he'd go in the house and watch cartoons for a little while. And then he'd come out on the back deck and look over the backyard and say, I'll be the coach. You know, he was all over the map, ADHD, with this football game. Here's what I want to tell you. Paul, like any good coach, is essentially calling the Christians in Rome into a huddle. Jews, Gentiles, Greeks, all these people coming together into a huddle, and he's saying, you got to get along. That's chapter 12. Love each other, use your gifts, be a godly church, be a unified church, go do the mission of Christ. But then in chapter 13, he's calling another play. Now, the question is, will we stay in the huddle? Or will we be like Brady and just get disinterested and leave the huddle? Because any good coach will inspire the team. Any good coach will motivate the team and challenge the team and stir the team to step up and play their best while the clock is running. And the closer you get to the end of the game, the 2-minute drill, say, the coach is going to call timeout, huddle the team, and be even more inspiring and more motivational and more instructional. And by the way, it's motivation, inspiration, but it's also information. It's, hey, you can do this. Here's the power. Here's the grace. Here's the motivation. But here's the play. Here's the information. Here's how to be in this world. Here's how to be in this moment while we're in the 2-minute drill of human history. And so he's assuming that you're in the huddle. He's assuming that you have the intent to take up the challenge. He's assuming you want to know the play. The question that's being asked invisibly is, how do we, Paul, if we are citizens of an eternal kingdom, and if Jesus is our eternal king, what do we do with this corrupt earthly king named Nero? And what do we do with this corrupt Roman system of government that is making peace? And by the way, in this moment, for this season, it wasn't a bad time to be a Christian. In Rome, it was peaceable, briefly. It was complicated racially. It was tense. Rome had moved from a republic to a dictatorship. We'll talk about that in a moment. But it's going to get worse. But in the moment, he is answering this question. You're citizens of an eternal kingdom, but you're also citizens of a temporary kingdom, of an earthly kingdom. And how do those jive? How do they go together? How do we live as citizens of heaven, but temporarily as occupants of earthly kingdoms? I want to say this too. He has the mission in view. Everything he's saying in chapters 12 and 13 and on are so the church can be effective. It's not so that we can just, us four no more, be comfortable in our church. It's so that we can be effective in the world, in the season God has placed us. And last forethought before we jump into the scripture, we have to keep in view two things simultaneously. First of all, that we live in complex political times. Okay? It's not hard to see that. And the whole narrative, the whole cultural noise is designed to polarize us. It's designed to enrage us and anger us and get us frustrated and cause us to live there. But it was equally or even more so complicated in the first century. A man is on the throne of Rome as the Caesar named Nero. Nero is going to become, in the 6 or 7 years after the receiving of this letter, he's going to become the most notable persecutor, tormentor, torturer of the first century church. Lots of horrible things he's going to do to the Christians that are even reading this letter. It's amazing. If we could get into a time capsule and go back to when they're reading this letter for the first time, we might say, hey, everybody, listen carefully, because you're going to really need this information in 7 years, because Nero is going to literally dip them in oil, tie them to posts, and light them on fire as human candles in his garden. And it gets worse from there, if that's even possible. So, politically complicated times are not new to gospel believers. And God gives us real anchor points here to embed into our heart and soul so that we navigate these times well. And essentially, it's the grace of God that puts us in this lane. And so the statement I want to put before you is that when grace motivates you, when grace calls the play, when grace puts you on mission in life, you're going to honor 4 things that we see in this chapter. The first thing we're going to see is that we honor our temporal citizenship. We honor our temporal citizenship. So look at verse 1. And as we read verses 1 to about 7, there's 4 thoughts here, but they kind of split into 2 pieces. The first is our earthly citizenship. How do we be good citizens? We're going to learn a lot about earthly structures of government and politics from God's heavenly point of view. And then the back half of this is, how do we as a church live in present day? What's the play that we run given the circumstances? And what I'm happy about in this moment is I have an opportunity to give you a 30,000-foot kind of worldview shaping experience with the Word of God. I'm going to refrain from giving any of my opinion, and I'm going to tell you exactly what God says about how we should think and feel and function in a day like today. Okay, so honoring our temporal citizenship. Look at verse 1. Let every soul, that's every one of us, be subject, that's submitted, obedient to higher powers. What are higher powers? Every level of governing authority, every level of civil government. Whether it's local, state, national, every level of civil government. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers. To say it simply, Paul's saying, hey, believers, be good citizens. In an ordinary posture, have a posture of submission to your governing authorities. Now, already I'm in a can of worms because some of you are thinking, well, what about? Try not to go to the exceptions yet. I'm going to get there. There are some times where civil disobedience is called for. That's not what Paul's talking about, broadly speaking. And by the way, one of the issues at hand that he's writing to is that Christians are going to be persecuted. That is one of the issues. But another issue is there's a false narrative being spun. There are active agents working to spin a false narrative against the first century Christians that they're a threat to civil government, that they're a threat to the reigning powers of Rome. Oh, these people they would say, hey, Jesus is our king. And they're not talking about resistance against Caesar. They're simply talking about a higher spiritual identity. But the spin machine, okay, so many things I want to say. I'm just holding back. The spin machine is taking that statement, Jesus is king. What about Caesar? Oh, you're a threat. And they're spinning it politically to make Christians the enemy. And that's actually going to work in a few years. And the idea is, oh, Christians are dominionists. They're taking over the world. They want to take over government. And let me tell you something. We are not given a biblical mandate to take over government. We're not bringing in a kingdom. The kingdom is growing in hearts one heart at a time. And Jesus will take over when he's good and ready. And he does not need your help or my help. But until that time, we're called to bring people into the spiritual aspects of the kingdom, to be born in Christ and to know God spiritually, to be redeemed in relationship to him. And so there is a popular theological construct out there, and it's very active all around us, and some strains of it are active in our present government. That is a Christian dominionism. It's a Christian takeover, as though if we could finally take over all the institutions, Jesus would come back. That's not the teaching of the Bible. In fact, it finds its heart way back in medieval Catholic theology and eschatology. I don't have time to go there. But Paul says to these citizens of Rome, in ancient Rome, hey, honor the authorities. Look at the next statement. For there is no power but of God. God's the final and ultimate authority. And the powers that be, the earthly civil powers that be, say it out loud with me, church, are ordained of God. So, next verse, whosoever resists the power, resists the ordinance of God. And they that resist, break the law, shall receive to themselves damnation, or the idea there is civil judgment, civil penalty. So in these first two verses, Paul is saying, hey guys, obey your government inasmuch as it is possible and reasonable, and we'll come back to that. Be a good citizen. And recognize this, Christians, the powers that are ordained of God. They're put in place by God. They're allowed. They're permitted of God. Does that mean God approves everything that every global leader has ever done? Oh, of course not. Does it mean he's the cause of all that bad stuff? No, of course not. Every national leader of human history will answer to God for how he used his temporary earthly power. And there will be justice. All of the evil, all of the genocide, it will all be reckoned with, okay? All Paul is saying is God governs in the kingdoms of men. And why does that matter? Again, because of persecution that's coming. And why does it matter? Because he wants Nero to read his letter. He wants Nero to understand Christians are no threat to government. We're not trying to take over. Oh, and by the way, Nero, you're going to answer to God. Do you catch what he's doing? He's teaching Christians how to be good citizens. He's teaching governing leaders how to govern. And he's reminding everybody that God is in authority. Listen, my friends. We don't have to like the leaders that God allows to be put in place. We don't have to agree with all of their policies. But we should, and we are called by God's word to respect their office and to recognize God lifts up and sets down. God is responsible for these things. The big win in this idea is that we discover that God has an order to things. And when we go with God's order, we release ourselves from all the tension and all the anxiety and all the stress of having to figure out what's really going on. I want to take you on a bit of a biblical tour for just a few moments. And I put all the verses in your outline, but here's the basic principles of the Bible when it comes to the globe and human history and governance and political leaders and civil authority. The first thought is that God raises up and removes kings. Daniel 2, blessed be the name of God forever and ever. He removes kings and he sets up kings. Daniel chapter 4, that the living, human beings, that the living may know that the Most High, that's God, rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomsoever he will. This is Daniel writing these words, the prophet. But Daniel, catch this. Daniel is saying these words to an evil pagan king. He was forcibly taken from Jerusalem, kidnapped, deported into a pagan city, Babylon, which eventually was overtaken by the kingdom of Persia. And for more than 70 years, Daniel functioned as a victim of injustice, a victim of tyranny, a victim of an overpowered pagan leader, but an agent of God to remind that leader, God rules in the kingdoms of men. Nebuchadnezzar, you're not God. Darius, you're not God. On and on we could go. The Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomsoever he will. The second principle is that God governs nations and borders. This is huge. Paul said in his message on Mars Hill in Acts 17, he's made one blood, all nations of men. You see, Satan says, no, not one race, many races. Let me remind you of something. If you're a biblicist, there is one race, humanity. There are many ethnicities, one race. So the whole racism play is a mischaracterization theologically. God created all the ethnicities. You should cherish your ethnicity, but you should remember we're one race. He's made of one blood, all nations of men. And listen to what Paul said. He's determined the times of those nations. Let me remind you, what he's saying here is he knows the first day of the United States of America, and he knows the last day of the United States of America. Maybe it never occurred to you that we live in a temporary kingdom. The United States of America will not be everlasting. This is not the everlasting kingdom. Oh, I'm grateful that I'm an American, and I want to be a patriotic, and I want to be a good and an honorable citizen. And I thank God for my earthly citizenship, and you should too. But you need to remember that God determines the times of the nations and the bounds of the nations, the bounds of their habitations. Job said he increases the nations and he destroys them. He enlarges the nations and he straightens them again. The third principle is that God uses even ungodly rulers for his purposes. We studied this not too long ago. Exodus 9, he told Pharaoh, I have raised you up to show my power. Pharaoh was an evil ruler. Nebuchadnezzar was an evil oppressor who oppressed Daniel, but Daniel was used by God, and God used Nebuchadnezzar's evil acts to do many things. Did he cause those evil things? No. Does he redeem those evil things? Does he cause all things to work together for his good purposes? Help me out. Yes, he does. Do we need to get too worked up every 4 years or every 2 years about who wins or who loses? No. Because ultimately, it's God's responsibility to manage at that level. First century believers didn't have election booths. They didn't have ballots. They didn't have the privilege of voting. And I'm thankful that we do. I'm grateful for the privilege, and I will participate in the process. I view it as a civic responsibility. But here's the deal. I've participated, I don't even know how many elections. I'd have to do the math. I'm almost 57. I've never had the privilege of voting for anything but 2 bad options. I'm not going to go through all the presidents and all their names and all the governors and all their names and all the Senate and House and all their names. I'm just telling you, they're all human beings. Never one time, unfortunately, was Jesus on the ballot. And so every time I had to mark a box, every time I had to color in a little circle, it was for some broken, flawed, ungodly human being. And that creates tension. It really does. But it's a great comfort to realize, wait, God sets up and removes kings, and God's in charge of nations, their beginning and end, and God uses even ungodly rulers for his purpose. Nobody can outplay God on this. And this is the most assuring reality. God is eternal king over all. Psalm 103, the Lord has prepared his thrones in the heavens, and his kingdom rules over all. Daniel chapter 7 speaks of Jesus. It speaks of the Son of Man coming to inherit the nations and to take up authority of civil government at the end of human history. And it says, there was given him, Jesus, dominion and glory and kingdom, that all people, nations, languages should serve him. So here's my point, my friends. It's all temporary, it's all short-lived until Jesus, once and for all, will set up his earthly 1,000-year kingdom, and then a new creation, and then an eternal kingdom. He is the one that will be king forever. Now, why do I tell you all that? Because as we come to Romans 13, and as we try to apply it to our complicated day, I want to take a moment and give you a discerning principle that will help you see behind the curtain of the noise and the chaotic political mayhem that wants to dominate your psyche. Let me give you, for instance, what I'm talking about. I've tried occasionally to pull up certain podcasts, and some of them at first I started to enjoy, their analysis of political events and cultural events and different things. But over time, I realized they're also angry. And they're also scornful and cynical, and no matter what podcast you listen to, everybody else is an idiot. Right? Like everybody is so stupid. And I found that the more I listened to those guys, the more I kind of learned their attitude. And even if, by the way, even if they were right, even if I thought they were right, it was the attitude of spite towards the rest of humanity that started to encroach in my psyche. And suddenly I'm getting this edge to me like, I'm right, these people are right, my favorite two podcasters and news programs are right, and everybody else is an idiot. And I realized, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to let these talking heads who don't know any more than I do in reality try to tell me how to be and how to feel and how my attitude is. And then I'm thinking, every week I get up and teach the Bible, and you don't know how great the temptation was during the inflamed rage seasons to bring it out in the pulpit. But then now I'm in God's territory. It's like, no, this is sacred space. My call is to give you the Word of God, not my spiteful, scornful opinions based on the 3 podcasts I listened to this week. I just want to encourage you to be really careful about who you're giving your thoughts and your attitude and your emotions and your psyche to, because they can really get you worked up and get you detached from the realities we're talking about. But here's the discerning thought that I want to share with you. I got to pick it up. Oh, this is so important, though. Do you remember when we talked through Revelation? Who has the authority? Who's the only being in the universe that has the ultimate and final authority to inherit the nations? Jesus. Okay, so Jesus will be the one who inherits the nations. In fact, I put the verses in your outline. Psalm 2, thou art my son, ask of me, I'll give you thine inheritance, the uttermost parts of the earth for thy possession. Psalm 72, he shall have dominion from sea to sea, yea, all kings will fall down before him, all nations shall serve him. Revelation 11, the kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ. So if you push through, if you peel back all the layers of the onion, you push through all of the smoke screen issues and rage and clickbait and emotions, and you get to the nucleus, here's the spiritual battle behind the scenes. Satan says to God, I'm the prince of the world. I will inherit the nations. God says, no, you won't. The seed of the woman crushes the head of the serpent. Jesus on the cross is already your defeat. And Satan says, I will do everything I can to bring my kingdom into being in this moment in human history to usurp your plan. So Satan wants the nations. Satan's idea is what you would call globalism. Globalism. Pastor Cary, that's political. That's not political. That's biblical. Satan wants the globe. And so here's the litmus test. Whenever you hear earthly verbiage about all of the world coming under a global governance, a global order, a new world order, you're hearing the plan of Satan push forward. And whenever you hear political speak or conversation about respecting nations and respecting identities and respecting borders and respecting individual nations, you are hearing biblical speak. In whatever case, in whoever the person is, because Jesus is the only one who has the authority to inherit the nations. So mark my words, he will, but everything moving towards globalism prior to that event is Satan trying to make his kingdom happen. Listen, if this is uncomfortable for you, set your emotions aside. I'm not being political. I'm trying to give you as biblical a worldview as I can so that you can see behind the modern clickbait news stories and look for the real spiritual battle. So, with that said, we got to move on to number 2. Here we go. We honor God's purpose for earthly powers. So this is still in this same lane where Paul says, okay, God sets up earthly civil government. It's God's idea. Trust his sovereignty, trust his plan, play the long game, be good citizens. But now in verses 3 to 7, he's going to tell us what are the jobs of civil rulers. And in a sense, this is his instruction to government, okay? And I'm going to summarize it this way. God's civil ordained purpose for civil authorities are twofold: protect and punish. It's real simple. It is civil government's, it's state authorities' job to protect citizens and promote good while simultaneously punish evil and restrain evil. That is government's job. Now, here's the hard part about it. Man-made government in a fallen creation on a fallen planet can only ever do imperfect justice, which is why we get so frustrated. Because every expression of justice from human hands is always insufficient and imperfect, and yet it's always better than if there were no system. Are you with me? So all we have until Jesus is broken systems, and every broken system trying to follow this basic model of protecting good, promoting good, and restraining and punishing evil. Every model following that or trying to follow that is going to be better than a model not following that, a model not protecting good and promoting evil, or no model at all. Okay, so understand, we live in a fallen world, a God-denying world, but in that state, God says to civil government, protect and punish. Let's read it, verse 3. For rulers, that's civil and state authorities, are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you see it? Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Why do you need to be afraid if you're not breaking the law? Do that which is good, and you'll have praise of the same. Be a good citizen, and government's there for your good. By the way, that's an inverse instruction to rulers to say, hey, honor the good. And by the way, if you don't Nero, if you don't president, if you don't prime minister, you're going to answer to God. But here's the framework, here's the worldview. Verse 4, for he, the ruler, is the servant, the minister of God, amazing, to you for good. But if you do that which is evil, be afraid. For he bears not the sword in vain. He's the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath on him that does evil. Wherefore you must needs be subject, not only for wrath, to avoid legal penalty, but for conscience sake. I want to keep going to verse 7. For this cause pay tribute, taxes. Yippee. Do you realize Jesus even paid tax to a Roman government that did evil things with his tax money? I don't like paying taxes any more than you do until I see our military or our education system Or until I see our police officers and civil servants and public servants and things that are good that every other country in America, in the world wishes they had access to. And then I'm like, oh wow, yeah, the government does a lot of bad stuff with my tax money, but there's a lot of good stuff being done with my tax money. And Paul says, look at it that way, that it's a privilege. And by the way, there's an inverse teaching. State, you better use the tax money for good. You better use it to promote good and restrain evil and punish evil. But it's in verse 6, he's saying, pay your taxes, for they're the ministers of God. Verse 7, render therefore to all their dues, tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom is due, fear to whom fear is due, honor to whom honor. But look back at verse 4. This is what I want to press into for a minute. Civil government is the minister of God to thee for good, but if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he bears not the sword in vain. I want to give you two examples, and I'll tell you, okay, like during a storm when the power lines go down and you're not supposed to go near power lines, I'm going to go near power lines right now, okay? I'm going to touch some live wires. You'll be okay. Just everybody take a breath. Okay, set aside your emotions for a minute, your reactionary, podcast programmed emotions. And I want you to look back on two issues that we're all familiar with right now. And I want to use them as an example to try to teach what Paul is explaining in this passage. The first is a couple months ago when we all witnessed the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk. All right, don't send me an email, all right? Just separate yourself from the emotion of that. Let's think about the humanity of it. I don't care about his politics. I wouldn't have said everything he said the way he said it and all that. So give me the caveat, please. But let's just think about the reality of the trauma of that moment and the loss for that wife and those kids. And if you can't hurt for that, something's really deeply broken in you, honestly. Just the human side of that. So some days later, they had that broadly televised service, that memorial service. And there was this moment that kind of went viral out of that service where Erica, Charlie's wife, stood up, and she's a professing Christian. And she stood up and she said something that was really unthinkable. I mean, and many of you know what she said. She said, I forgive. And it's like the country took a collective, I mean, that impacted even the most callous hearts. She stood up with tears and deep emotion and said, I forgive the young man that shot my husband. And I will tell you, as a believer, biblically speaking, this is our command, to forgive those who hurt us. Because of the great forgiveness that we have from Jesus, we're commanded to have that spirit of forgiveness. So I would say she did exactly what a biblical believer would do in that moment, or should do. We would all say, goodness, she has every right to justice and vengeance and all these things. Terrible tragedy. So she said, I forgive. And the world collectively gasped and wondered and applauded that. I can't remember if it was at the service or sometime later. I just remember seeing a clip then of our president. And he referenced her forgiving. Do you guys remember this? And what did he say? He said, I do not forgive. In fact, he went on to say, I hate. Okay. And now, as a person and as a Christian, you might go, oh, that's terrible. But let's stop and think, and let's catch our breath and take a second look, because let me tell you how to think about that biblically. He's not just an individual in that moment. He is the executive power head of state. And where there's assassination of a Christian man and a husband, it's the Christian wife's job to forgive, and it's the state's job to bear the sword. So what I would tell you is, like it or not, like him or not, that's irrelevant. Your feelings about our current president are irrelevant. Any president should have said something like what he said, because it's the power of state's job. You say, Pastor, I disagree with you. Look at verse 4. You can disagree with me, but don't send me an email. First of all, if you send me an email, make it nice, okay? If it's a mean email, just come talk to me. I stand back here. Just come yell in my face. That's much easier to take, okay? Because I'm going to call you anyway, all right? And thirdly, email God. These are his words, okay? I didn't write it. I'm just telling you what it says. He is the minister of God. If you do that which is evil, be afraid. He bears not the sword in vain, but he's the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath on him that does evil. Do you get it, church? Okay, it's the state's job to restrain and punish evil. It's the Christian's job to forgive. All right, if I haven't gotten close enough to the live wires, let me touch another one. How many of you have an opinion about immigration? Pastor Cary, please. We're about to have a church split. Okay, relax. Here's the thing. Why is this so complicated? I'm going to say three things, and you're going to go, oh, that makes sense. It's complicated, number one, because it's the state's job to enforce its laws, biblically. It's complicated, number two, because it's the Christian's job to love the stranger, to love the immigrant. It's complicated, number three, because the real problem is that our laws need to be rewritten, but the people who make the laws would rather have a political hot potato to leverage against the populace. Are you tracking with me? The problem is the laws. The state enforces the laws. That's biblical. The Christian is called to love the immigrant. And so we're all, as Bible believers, we're caught in this weird, horrible, tense middle where we all feel the tension of what do we want? And the political process is so flawed that it loves that, and it can polarize us. I can tell you this as a believer, unless you're an agent of government, your call is to love everybody. Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you is Romans 13 clears the deck and gives you a place for your emotions and helps you reckon with the realities that, yeah, there is complicated times between the powers of state and the call of the Christian, and it was so for them in the first century as they're living under tyrannical Roman dictatorship, and Christian persecution is about to unfold. Okay, last thought on this point, and then we'll cruise through the last two very quickly, and that is, what about civil disobedience? Civil disobedience is a part of the scriptural narrative. But when? And here's the simple principle. When lower laws and lower leaders compel us to break higher laws. When a state says, disobey your God, you have permission to civil disobedience. Moses' mother did not throw her baby into the river and kill him. Daniel did not eat the king's meat and did not stop praying even though the law said you're not allowed to pray to anybody but the king. Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego would not bow to the golden idol. Civil disobedience caused them to be thrown into a furnace of fire. And Peter and the apostles said in Acts chapter 5, we ought to obey God rather than men when they were commanded to go out and stop witnessing of the gospel and stop telling people about Jesus. So what is Romans 13 saying? It's a posture of submission, but it's not the endorsement of disobedience to God. You got it? All right. God sanctions the state's authority to use force to deter evil. It is the government's responsibility to protect and punish, to advance good and restrain evil. All right, let's change the channel. Give me 7 more minutes for 3 and 4, and then we're going to baptize. You guys okay? All right, don't send me an email unless it's nice. Oh. Number 3, we honor God's call to love outwardly. What Paul is going to now say is, guys, if you just be driven by, taken up by the call to love, you'll obey all of God's laws. You'll be a good citizen. And why does he want us to be good citizens? Because he wants our witness to be bright and light and loud. He wants our witness to be effective. Owe no man anything but to love one another. All of us have this one obligation. We don't owe Jesus for our salvation, but we do owe every other human being love. Why? Because we are that loved. We are obligated, we're responsible to take the great love we have been given and to give it away, in the idea that in giving that love away, we can draw people, invite people, witness to people, and introduce them to the love of Christ. For he that loves another has fulfilled the law. For this, thou shalt not commit adultery. You wouldn't do that if you loved. You shall not kill. You wouldn't do that if you loved. Shall not steal. You wouldn't do that. Shall not bear false witness. Shall not covet. If there's any other commandment, it's all wrapped up in, it's briefly comprehended in this saying, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Love works no ill to his neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. We honor God's call to love outwardly. I just want to say this and then move on. Maybe not most, I don't know, I'll say many churches, the undiagnosed, the silent underground problem in many churches is that they're completely inwardly focused. It's the decisions being made, the direction being set. It's all about what do we want. And the outward church, the Roman first century church, is being compelled by Paul to look outward. And the right question to ask is not what's best for us, but what's best for the unreached? What's best for the unbeliever? What's best for people that can't find a parking place? You see, because you'll wait in line for a parking place, but you know what is happening sometimes? People are driving around and leaving. That ought to break our hearts. I'll tell you all about that December 7th. So we love outwardly, we live outwardly, we love lavishly. Number 4, we honor God's call to missional living. Now what Paul does here in verses 11 through 14 is like the end of the huddle. He's called a timeout. It's the 2-minute drill. We can win the game. He's got to inspire the team. He's got to call the play. He's got to rally them. And so he's going to give us a couple of very rapid fire play calls. What's he going to say? Verse 11, wake up and live ready. Knowing the time, that it is high time to awake out of sleep. For now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. He's talking about the second coming of Christ. And hey, by the way, if they were near, how much nearer are we? So Paul is huddling the Jews and the Gentile Christians in Rome who already had racial tension. And he's saying, guys, we got to wake up. This is the time to get active. This is the time to come together. We're close to the end of the game. We're running out of time. Verse 12, leave the darkness and be light. The night is far spent. The day is at hand. Let us therefore cast off the works of darkness. Anything that advances Satan's work, cast it off. And let us put on the armor of light. Put on a lifestyle that's bright. That's a bright, effective, active witness for Christ. Verse 13, he's going to say, live honestly and honorably. Let us walk honestly, as in the day. Let everybody see your lifestyle, is what he's saying. Not in rioting and drunkenness, that's Saturday night partying. Not in chambering, that's sexual sensuality, adultery, fornication. Wantonness, not in strife and envy, that's materialism and greed, and strife and striving against each other. Moving from dark to light, rioting to worshiping, drunkenness to gospel ministry, hooking up to looking up, sensuality to spirituality, strife to service, envy to joy. And then verse 14, I want you to read it with me. Ready, go. Put ye on the Lord Jesus Christ, and make not provision for the flesh to fulfill the lusts thereof. Like a garment. Like you get up and get ready in the morning for Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. He's saying when you wake up, put on Jesus. Take off your old life and your old ambitions and your old attractions and your old desires and put on Jesus and live out loud and love out loud. What he's saying is if you're in Jesus, you don't need that old life. You can put off self-destructive, sensual, self-gratification and put on purposeful, meaningful Jesus living. I met a man this past week, two quick illustrations, and then we'll close and see baptism. Met a man this past week, his name is Kevin, he's in his mid-40s. We spent some time together on Monday at a short meeting in Philadelphia. I don't have time to go into the whole story of the meeting, but Kevin is, at 45, a very, very materially successful individual. And he began to tell me the story of his journey to chasing success, chasing financial success, entrepreneurial success, and nominally Christian, nominally following Jesus. And as he began to unfold his story, he talked about how a nominal following of Jesus and an ardent passion for material success put strain on his marriage and strain on his family, and God basically used his own success to break him. Bad priority structure, material success, but it's empty and vain and pointless where there's no purpose and there's no eternal mission to it all. And then he said, until 8 years ago. Now, he was a Christian before that, but he said, 8 years ago, God got my attention. He said, I realized my chase of material things was causing me to lose what was really valuable to God. My family, my marriage, my walk with Christ, my church. He said, and Cary, here's what I did. I went all in. He said, I became a Jesus freak. He said, and I do business and work with a whole bunch of Jesus freaks. He said, I became totally committed to the kingdom of Jesus. So he said, I'm looking for things, looking for stuff, looking for ways to be successful for the kingdom, looking for ways to make more money and multiply resources and get them into kingdom causes. I mean, I'm just like addicted to it. I'm a Jesus freak. He went all in. And he said, I've never been happier in my whole life. Contrast that Jesus freak mentality to the walk that we took a week ago with 84 folks from our church through ancient Ephesus. The ruins of Ephesus go back more than 2,000 years. 85% of this excavation is still under dirt. You look at it on Google Earth, 85% of the city has not been excavated, it's still buried under dirt. 15% has been excavated, and it's the largest excavation in the world. It's a huge site, but it's only 15% of the original city. The very beginning of the walk through Ephesus, we stopped at this place with these pillars and these big stone walls that have been reconstructed, unburied and reconstructed. And the guide said, this is the governing center of Ephesus. And Ephesus was one of the hubs of the Roman Empire in what is modern day Turkey as the empire pushed east. She said, this governing center was like City Hall, and this was the place of the eternal flame. And I'm standing there, and it's all in ruins. It's all rocks and broken stuff and dirt and weeds, and I'm like, well, it's not burning now. So much for the eternal flame. And in that moment, I was thinking about, and the Spirit of God took that moment and said to me, Cary, one day your life, your material life, your physical existence, and everything you've ever owned, it'll be like this. It'll be buried in dirt. But you're not a citizen of these kingdoms. Your true citizenship is the eternal kingdom. And in that moment, God just sparked my heart and said, stay on mission, keep your eyes on the prize, press toward the mark, keep aiming at my kingdom. So I put forth to you, friends, first of all, are you a citizen of the only kingdom that matters? Because you will come and go, and earth will come and go, and America will come and go, but your soul will live forever somewhere. And if you're not a citizen of heaven, Jesus died to bring you and to give you citizenship. And if you are a citizen of heaven, Romans 13 makes you free, emotionally, psychologically, your anxiety, all of it. The politics, the political narrative does not have to own you. Be wise, be a good citizen, love everybody, and be on mission. That's the play. Ready? Break. Or let's pray together. God, thank you for this time. Thank you for the